Hi, everyone, and welcome to a double header episode of Words, Images, and Worlds. Delighted to be joined on this episode by creative team, creative duo Chris Anderson and Dave Accampo, both of whom I've recently seen in person, so I can confirm that they do exist.
Is that a question that comes up a lot?
Not generally not, generally not. I will tell you, teaching in the pandemic, there were times where I thought, do people just think I'm like a Zoom avatar? And uh, I also exist. So thanks to you both for joining today.
Yeah, thanks for
Absolutely.
having us on.
Yeah.
Yeah, my pleasure. I met you at Heroes Con and took this book home with me, Lost
Yeah.
Angels, and greatly enjoyed that. There are your autographs inside, once again confirming you are in fact, real people. So enjoyed that and curious about how the two of you connected and started collaborating. And also going to point out that we have among us at least three goatees. So this is good. This is
Yeah.
Well, you take that, Dave.
um, on the goatee note,
Uh,
yeah, you might have to fill me in on some of the details. Chris and I have known each other for a long time now. You were teaching at the school where my a good friend of ours, my co-writer on a lot of things, his wife was also teaching there, and I was invited to his son's birthday party. It was maybe he was maybe what Lenny was what 2, 3, 4 something like
something,
that,
yeah.
very young. And they're like, "Oh, you got to meet Chris. He's a comic book artist," and they knew that I absolutely loved comics. And I go to their apartment, and I knew immediately who Chris was because he had given Lenny a gift wrapped present, but he had drawn on the wrapping paper. It was like plain brown wrap, but it was like a monkey in a spacesuit. And I'm
oh, love
like, okay, all right, you're my dude. And then we started chatting, and Chris is a little bit younger than me, but like he had older brothers, and so it kind of evened out in that our comics vernacular, it was the same. We both kind of understood Art Adams and or loved Arthur Adams, and then
that.
I could see
Hmm.
a lot of like Chris Bocciolo in Chris's newer stuff, in the Chris stuff that Chris was doing, and that was another touch point for me. He I was kind of leaving behind these sort of early image guys. I think he got hit with a face full of the early image stuff, right? You were a big
Yeah,
that
yep,
was a big influence on
that
you.
pie hit me right in the face.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. But we had a similar sensibility and a similar language and way to talk, and so we just started working together with our friend Jeremy. We co-wrote something that Chris worked on, drew for us, and then he worked on something for Jeremy, and then it was sort of my turn, and that's where Lost Angels came up because I had been building up this concept of something that I wanted to do. And I really needed, an artist to bring life to it. And he was like, "Yeah, let's do it." So we put together a mini comic, and that was a preview for Lost Angels.
Nice, nice. And the result is lovely and enjoyable, and I plan on sharing it with readers as well. I told you when I met you both, I'm a high school English teacher, so I'm always
Oh
looking
yeah,
Yeah,
for like
yep.
comics, things that can grab readers. And there's that mysticism, there are those horror elements, so lots of things. Plus just adolescence in
yeah,
Lost Angels and kind of exploring that strange time of living. So lots there to enjoy.
Yep.
And I love the collaborative like pool of community you've got going on.
oh
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
Lost Angels was interesting in that you kind of mentioned all those elements, and those are all things that were important to me. It was kind of this big stew, and there was a lot of on my end. Sorry, I've got something beeping in the background. I don't know if you guys hear that, but I'm
No, I can't
shut
hear
it
it.
off.
It's
Okay,
all
good.
good.
All
It's all
right.
good. The headphones
It
are
was
solid.
messing my okay. Anyway, yeah. So I was living in Los Angeles. I had a son who at the time was starting high school. But I was a divorced dad, and I had no real idea of how to operate that. Teenagers and being divorced and all this stuff. My life was going through a lot of changes, and I was dating a woman who is Mexican American, Latina, And like, so, and we actually ended up like mentoring kids that are like prepping, high school kids that are prepping to go to college. All this stuff kind of filtered into my mind because living in Los Angeles, dating somebody who just speaks Spanish and is a part of that culture, I felt like I suddenly had this like back door. Like we'd go to a restaurant and she wouldn't talk to the host, she talked to the busboy and in Spanish, and then get this whole like inside track on the thing and on the good stuff and where to sit and all that. And I felt like it was so interesting. And I felt like, here was this sort of, again, like I said, inside track. And it had me thinking a lot about culture and a lot about immigrant cultures and how you maintain your culture in a new world. And so the idea of like a spaceship crashing and the immigrants being refugees, but also having wings, which kind of puts them literally above you in this weird, like, but yet below what most of the populace wants them to be, and I just thought that was such an interesting place. And I'm like, and that was kind of the genesis of a lot of that. But then bringing Chris in was kind of really about like, look, I want to do this as a comic. I want to do this as something that really is not like a pitch for a television show or a movie or like a frustrated writer trying to do something else, thinking comics is the easier medium. I wanted something that really took advantage of that comics language, and so that's where Chris comes into it.
Nice. And so that kind of leads into the next question, which is generally why comics? What is it about comics that connected both of you and attracts both of you to this medium?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess for me, one of the things that I always tell people is, I could have gone and been, a film director or something like that, and it would have still sort of, in certain ways, besides, the illustration bug, scratched all the itches. But once you start getting more and more cooks in the kitchen and having to sort of, unless you're an auteur or somebody who has a bunch of films under their belt that were successful and can really know the dynamic and how to deal with studios, there's so many forces that change your way of storytelling, and the script that you started with is not the movie that you end up with. And with comics, we can do whatever we want. We are the directors, we are the writers, we are the set dressers, we're everything. And so it's not that I tell people, it's not that I don't like to play, that I don't play well with others. It's that I just don't want to play with others, or very few. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So same thing with animation. I went into animation for a minute and I was like, nope, this is not it. It's comics. Comics is right.
There's something really intimate about comics, about the collaboration and the creation side, where it does feel like I've been thinking about that a lot lately, like how, especially as we, our last book we funded through Kickstarter and put it into the hands. And it just felt like being in a garage band, like just sort of that sort of intimacy and just that collaboration of let's jam and let's make some comics. And I think that was one thing that really appeals to me. I had been doing some short films in Los Angeles because, you're in LA, that's what you do. And I remember listening to a podcast when they were brand new. And I had just gotten my first like iPod Nano, I think it was, to date me a little bit there. And we were directing a short film where it was taking like an hour for the lighting and the cinematographer to just get the perfect lighting. And then you'd bring in the actor and she'd run down the hallway, you'd yell cut, and it was time to strike and set up the next shot. Like it was literally like an hour of a setup for the perfect shot and then 10 seconds. And I'm listening to the podcast and I'm like, I could just get rid of the picture. And so, and I have a distribution platform, and that led to this thing that Jeremy and I co-created called Wormwood, which was an audio drama that ran from like 2007 to 11. And that was me, loving filmmaking and that idea, but getting frustrated with the actual making of it and going, well, if we just had a bunch of actors and some microphones, what could we do? And that naturally led me back to comics because I think I had always loved comics, right? And it was like, okay, Chris, you can draw a city and it doesn't have to be bound by the laws of physics or the budget, or it doesn't have to look like a matte painting. You can, in the background of a CGI thing, you can actually just design this whole city. And it's just the two of us like doing this. And then like, you can draw people flying down and you can like, angels in cinema have never really looked perfect to me. Right now they're either too CGI or they're too puppety looking, and it never quite looks right. And so I'm like, this has to be a comic. And then, you know, in talking with Chris, I also had it in the other vision I had in my head was like the old like Daredevil comics where he's like bouncing off a flagpole and, you know, onto another building. And I'm like, you know, it wouldn't be realistic, but if there's a human girl that lives in the angel side of town and they all live way high up in the sky, she grows up with no fear of heights and just bounces off around everything. That's something Chris can draw and make it look cool as heck, but like we don't have to worry about child safety or anything like that. It becomes this cool sort of fantasy, and so I love that about it too.
Nice. And that storytelling, it allows for such interesting social commentary too, and just commentary on the world. That's one of the things I love about science fiction and fantasy, and love that you both bring that in the comics. I also want to ask you about your horror one-shots that are out there in the world that I've just discovered since meeting you.
Yeah, sure. You want me to take that?
Yeah, talk about it.
So while we were working on Lost Angels, I was sort of drawing and coloring the whole thing, and it was really the first long form comic that I ever worked on. And so kind of handled all that. And then Dave goes in and he handles the lettering and the design work. He's a graphic designer by day. But so in order to have something else that we could put out, we didn't really at conventions, we didn't really have anything else that we could put out. We did these, Dave wrote these 12-page short horror stories. We started out with the first one called Devil Skin. And I was tired of drawing wings, you know, and it was just to give me a bit of a break from that. And it was to give me a bit of a break from having to color every page. So we just decided to spot color it with red. It was super successful. It was just flying off the tables. So we decided to do another one. And that one was green, and it was called Witch Heart. And so just you know, when the creature would come in, we would spot color it that with the green, and then we just decided to keep working our way through the spectrum and putting it out as these like 12-page, you know, inexpensive short horror stories. But you know, over time we worked our way through the entire spectrum, and we decided it was a good idea for us to collect it. And I have a friend, I'm actually in Minnesota right now. I live in Los Angeles, but I'm in Minnesota. But I have a friend here in Minnesota who makes puppets sort of for a living. He designs and makes puppets. And when we were doing the one-shot stories, he decided that he wanted to make some puppets based off of the characters just for fun. And we really loved them. So we had to kind of connect all 6 of these stories together, and the way that we did that was Dave came up with this character, Professor Spectral, who goes around in an old, you know, horse-drawn wagon, as you do, telling it's like a puppet stage, telling stories to the kiddies that he probably shouldn't be telling them, you know, and introducing every story. And then we decided to kickstart it and release it as a full volume, and the puppets that my friend made were part of the Kickstarter, so that was pretty cool. We like to say that this book sort of told us what it wanted to be, rather than, because it wasn't conceptualized this way, it just sort of happened as it was going, and little inspirations cued us in as like, oh, this is the direction we should go. So it was a lot of fun.
That's so cool. That's cool. And I love the like frame that you use, very Ray Bradbury-ish.
Yes. Yeah.
Here's a story. Very creative. I love it.
It was really something that you know, as we looked at collecting them, it felt like, look, we've been putting these out, you know, publishing small batch runs at shows, and so it's a very like kind of unique limited edition piece, but I want somebody that bought all 6 to still want to buy the whole volume. And so that framing sequence was really important to me, to kind of like, okay, what binds these all together, what recontextualizes all those stories. And yeah, his friend's puppets like just in my mind, I just saw that creepy puppet wagon, like timeless, just the horse-drawn carriage. And yeah, it became a whole exercise in how do we thread these together and create a larger story with it. And again, yeah, as Chris said, it was us, basically the book telling us what it was. And each story is kind of unique. Each story we tried a different approach in our collaboration and in the way we created it. One was actually done as an Instagram comic first, so it was all square panels.
Nice,
but
nice.
the idea was, okay, well, let's do it that way. It was at the start of the pandemic, and we can do our next one shot horror as an Instagram, but I have to be able to assemble it into a 12-page story. So there was this like, I'm going to do square panels, but we're going to do 6 on a page, and then I'm going to have 12 pages, so I have 72 panels. And it was like this math, which sometimes is antithetical to the writer side of me, but sometimes it actually kind of fuels it. Like, it kind of really helped it along in this case. So everyone had these little challenges and these fun bits that we did.
That's kind of the other thing with this story, is that we approached every single story differently. The way that Dave presented the script to me, and every single one of them, almost every single one of them, was different. One was Marvel style. One was, panel 1. This is what's going on in the panel. Like a standard script. We worked so many different ways, just kind of challenging each other and seeing the different ways that we could work together. We've done it all at this point, and even my art style, kind of changed because we weren't rushing through this thing. So it took about 6 years to get through all 6 things, I think. And so my art style kind of changed, and I played with the storytelling, and like the Wolf Moon, I played with like hardly any panel borders. And then like he was saying, Dollhouse, we just did in squares as Instagram thing, and since it's about a house kind of, Dave put these little photographic corners in the corner of each square, so it's like you're flipping through a photo album, it just worked out perfectly, the whole thing. And you should really check it out.
That's the whole thing, right? Like go and check the things out. And I can't say enough about the creativity, and it's great to find like-minded people that you can try different things with, and you share that love of comics or love of anything really if you're collaborating. So I'm totally with you on the importance of curating the collaborative community. That's a lot of C words, but anyway. So speaking of go and check it out, where should folks go if they want to check out Lost Angels, the horror one shots, as well as anything that's upcoming or in progress?
Spectral can be found at spectralcomic.com. And let's see, Lost Angels. I know you can get it on my website, chrisandersoncomics.com. It's put out by a company called Comicer. I think that they're is it comicerpress.com, Dave?
I think it's Comicer Press. Comicer with a CK in it. So COMICKER press.com. And they should have our book Lost Angels. Yeah. Yep. I think you can also still get it on Amazon.
Yes.
The things are on Amazon. Yeah, absolutely.
And Spectral Comic, because that goes to our Kickstarter store, you can actually find Lost Angels and another graphic novel I did called The Margins that I did with a different artist is also at that store. So if you go to Spectral Comic, you can get everything. If you go to, what is it, Color Me Chris Anderson? Is that your website, Chris?
chrisandersoncomics.com.
Oh, chrisandersoncomics.com. Or if you go to davidaccampo.com, I have a store that I set up there too that's got our stuff. So there are like lots of ways to find us at this point.
Awesome. That's part of it. That is part of it. And I'll say for the Spotify podcast listening, I'll link those in kind of the description. YouTube doesn't allow me to do that, but if folks are watching the video, one of those websites is Chris's username on Zoom right now, so you can actually just kind of check it out right there. Yeah.
You know what? Since you mentioned Spotify, I just have to say this because what people don't realize, Lost Angels Volume 1 is done, complete, and in print. We did a Volume 2, and it's digital only. You can still get them, I think, through Kindle. Or maybe through the Comicer website, I'm not sure. But I love that one because we called it the School Days Playlist, and it was kind of like Spectral. It was like 8 short stories this time, and each one was a slightly different genre. There was a mystery and an action comic and a romance comic, and it was all just stories around the school. But in each one, I went out of my way to build a Spotify playlist,
I
the
love it.
curated Spotify playlist for each installment of the book. And I don't think anybody's ever seen it. So if you're on Spotify, go find the
Yeah,
Lost Angels playlist, because I was kind of proud of those.
we will link that too. Absolutely. Love a good playlist. So was that what you were listening to as you were creating, or was that after?
A little bit of both. Sometimes
Yeah.
it would be that. Sometimes it would be, what would these kids be listening to? Sometimes it would be, what does this remind me of in high school? Or just, what does this feel like to me? So it's a pretty eclectic mix of older and newer stuff. A lot
Nice.
of teenage anthems.
Nice, nice. And there are so many. I'm gonna hold up the
Yes.
book one more time. I'll probably disappear behind it, but there it is. Anything that we've missed on the list? Any questions at all that you want to say a little bit more about progress or in progress projects or anything like that that you want to make sure that listeners get to hear a little bit about?
Um, there's a couple days left for a project that I'm part of. It's a on Zoop. There is a anthology of stories about Stardust, the Fletcher Hanks character,
Uh-huh,
that
uh-huh.
Van Jensen is editing and putting together with all sorts of great people, Mike Allred and Jeffrey Allen Love, and just so many people. My friend Doc Wyatt wrote a story for it, and so I'm doing that right now. But I think there's like just a few days left, so get on Zoop and grab a copy of that. I'm also serialized in heavy metal right now, a story that I'm writing and drawing. Uh, Whenever those come out, they're so random and sporadic, but you can go and check those out too. And then I'm working on a couple of other things that I can't really talk about, doing some
The
storyboards and things like that. So,
the NDA world. I understand. I understand.
yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And we will be in another Kickstarter coming out. So if you follow us on social media, I'm D Accampo at Twitter and Instagram, and eventually Blue Sky if I ever get an invite. But yeah, D Accampo is a good place to follow me, and we'll kind of update you guys as we have more stuff that comes out. We completed a story for another anthology that's going to be a cool. It's sort of a horror, sci-fi, romance kind of 12 pager again, and I'm excited about that one. And then we're always pitching projects, so Chris and I have like maybe 4 other pitches in different stages, but they're just not anywhere yet.
Love that.
So we'll see. But yeah, we if you guys follow us online, and then we'll definitely be updating as we go along.
All right. Sounds great. Sounds great. I love how generative the collaboration is and looking forward to reading more. And always great to meet people that are doing new work in comics and things that I haven't seen before. So really, really excited to share that.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you both.